Hey, hi, howdy, and hello. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Argue, where I shamelessly rip off Anthony Fantano and ask for you, the viewers, to submit your hottest takes, and then I respond to them. If you want to be in our next video, you gotta subscribe, go to the community tab, and then enter in your hot take whenever you see the next community post asking for them. Godzilla in Fortnite is objectively bad for the MonsterVerse and Godzilla as a whole, because it really dilutes the themes of the MonsterVerse more than Wingard already has. Because films like Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island had realistic tones where they were somewhat believable, unlike movies like Godzilla x Kong and especially the Fortnite collab, which completely abandoned what made the MonsterVerse successful in the first place by making it completely unrealistic and kid-friendly, which could spell the demise of the MonsterVerse like it did for the Showa era. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that a Fortnite collab is not the end of the world for Godzilla. If you can have Michael Myers in Fortnite, then you can have Godzilla in Fortnite, and it won't ruin the impact of any Halloween movies or Godzilla movies. I do think, though, that you bring up a very interesting point at the end there, where you talk about how the MonsterVerse is slowly becoming more kid-friendly, which is what the Showa movies did, and that ultimately led to their downfall. And I think that's actually a really interesting point that I hadn't really thought of before. A lot of people do compare the MonsterVerse to the Showa era, how it started out more serious in tone and then gradually gets more goofy. But considering it from that angle, and you consider where the Showa movies ended, yeah, that is very concerning. Granted, at that point it's just speculation, because Godzilla x Kong performed very well at the box office despite its not so good quality. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of where it goes from here, but that's all speculation at this point. Godzilla x Kong actually had really good VFX. Sure, it was hit or miss, but so was -1, and it's weird how more critical there are of one and not the other. But what also makes VFX good isn't just the look, but animation, movement, detail, expressions, fight scenes, environments, effects for water, and such. Godzilla x Kong also did an amazing job with making Hollow Earth alive and the visual storytelling being amazing. I mean, the CGI in Godzilla x Kong is not the worst thing in the world. I think a lot of it's hampered by the weird camera effects that they use in that movie, where they add this like vignette to it and they try to make it look all kind of like retro and 60s. It just kind of comes off as looking like a video game with chromatic aberration. I think that -1 had a reason to be hit or miss with its special effects, and that's because it had a $15 million budget. Meanwhile, Godzilla x Kong had 10 times the budget, so there's not really much of an excuse there. I think that the visual storytelling of Godzilla x Kong is very solid. I mean, you consider the workload that they had with all of those Kong scenes, and the fact that there are just moments where we have no human characters on screen for a very long portion of the movie. It's impressive, but I just am not a fan of how it was executed. A lot of that has to do with Wingard's blocking and direction, but still, I mostly disagree. I never liked Destroy All Monsters. It's cool how we see so many monsters, but aside from the New York attack, we only see them in almost static, uninteresting actions in a famous city. The final fight isn't even all that great, because it's literally all of them versus Ghidorah. Not exactly a hard final round to beat, and the humans and their plot is the least interesting in the franchise. No one's character is written to be charismatic like other Godzilla films of the Showa era. I think it's one of the most boring of the franchise, to be honest. I agree completely. I think that Destroy All Monsters is one of the most overrated Godzilla movies in the entire series for those very reasons that you mentioned. Yes, there are a ton of monsters in the movie, and that's great to see, but like, these are all static shots. Like, here's Varen. Great, we never see him again. Like, that shouldn't really count as a legitimate monster appearance if he's not participating in any of the action. The human plotline is god-awful, and these are the least interesting aliens in, like, any Godzilla movie ever. The final battle, while fun to look at, because it is a very interesting battle considering it's just everyone ganging up on King Ghidorah, still just feels tensionless, because it's like, well, yeah, of course 30 monsters are going to stomp Ghidorah into the ground. Like, it's not even a fair fight. So I agree completely with this person. We don't watch kaiju movies for the story. We can all agree on that. However, that doesn't excuse the abysmal quality of the MonsterVerse's human-driven plots, which take up roughly 70% of the movie. I mean, sure, I don't think that we can all agree on that, because frankly, I love a lot of the human storylines in kaiju movies. I think that when they are executed well, it amplifies the kaiju action tenfold and makes it way more meaningful. However, Yes, a lot of the MonsterVerse has really, really bad human plot lines, so I do agree with you. I wish that there was more focus on Godzilla in those movies because they certainly have the budget to do so. Godzilla Minus One isn't the best film. While it's a good film, to me, it's just another Godzilla film. Plus, the title makes no sense. When I first watched it, I thought the main character was going to die when he crashed the plane and die while everyone else in that attack survives, hence the name. Yeah, that's a complete misunderstanding of what minus one means. Minus one refers to Japan being at zero after World War II because they were bombed twice, and so they're at zero, they have nothing. And Godzilla appears and terrorizes them, so that brings them down to minus one. That is the point of the title. People should stop hating on the Godzilla fans who draw weird Rule 34 art or fetish art of Godzilla. It's perfectly understandable not to like it, but it's not right to call those people fake fans or a disgrace to the franchise. The art they make doesn't always determine who they are as people or fans. I'm not saying all of them are justified in their art, but we shouldn't judge them as a whole. I think that's one of those where it's a slippery slope. I think if you start to welcome more of that weird Godzilla art, I'm not going to really talk much about what that art is, but I'm sure you can imagine it. But I think if we start to allow that more and more into the franchise and that becomes more representative of the franchise, then the Godzilla fandom will just become the Sonic fandom, like with how that was in the 2000s. Like that was a franchise that was pretty much ruined because of how people interpreted the fans. I should know, I stayed away from Sonic for decades because of that very reason. So I think it's one of those where people should do their best to ignore it and just not harass the people that make it. But also it's like, it's cringe. Like, I'm sorry, it is. But just leave them alone. Don't bully them. Just let them do their thing and pray to God people don't see more of it and think that the rest of the fandom is like that. Son of Godzilla is a beautiful film about Godzilla adopting a child, and it is the best Showa film. I don't think it's the best by any means, but it's definitely kind of in the middle with me. Like it's up towards the top, but it's like in that like kind of halfway point. It's very endearing with what they try to do. I just rewatched this like yesterday, so it's very fresh in my mind. I love the Godzilla storyline, how we see him almost like finding peace and, you know, enjoying being a father. I think that's very interesting. I love the weather plot, how like they're trying to solve overpopulation, which is interesting seeing that from a 60s perspective. You don't really think about overpopulation being a problem in the 1960s, but I suppose it was big enough for them to actually make a whole movie about it. Regardless, it's a very interesting direction for Godzilla, and it's also one of the better island movies compared to Ebra Horror of the Deep. Like, it takes the foundations of Ebra Horror of the Deep, it takes what a lot of people like that movie for being, and it amplifies them tenfold. It makes the island actually something that's dangerous, whereas in Ebra Horror of the Deep, it just felt like a bad movie set. In Son of Godzilla, like, there's giant praying mantises, there's Kamanga, it just feels more alive, and I love that aspect of it. Thank you so much to everyone that submitted their hot takes to the community post. Again, just reminding people, if you want your hot take to be mentioned in a video, it's in the community post whenever we post a new one. So the old one, like that's null. I've already recorded everything for it, so if you respond to it, great, but like I'm not gonna bring it up in a video. You gotta wait for the new ones to come out. Whenever you see it, comment, and it will be in the video if it's interesting to me or it's actually detailed. Don't just say, Godzilla X Kong is mid, and then that's it. Like, you need to actually say, I think X because Y and Z. Just be a little bit more detailed with your thoughts, and I'll include it. Don't write an essay also. Like, I can't read out an entire essay for a video. I apologize for being a bit picky with this stuff. It's just, I want to make sure that there's topics in here that I could actually talk about in videos and have something to say, because if it's just too vague, I won't have anything to say. It'll just be like, yeah, I agree. And no one wants that for a whole video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.